Hi everybody, welcome back to volume 7 of 5 disturbing, creepy, paranormal, and just spine-chilling stories that I narrate from Reddit. If you enjoy these kinds of videos, I would really appreciate it if you'd hit the thumbs up button, and if you want to see more of my content, please don't forget to hit subscribe. I hope that you enjoy the video. Be careful who you match with. I'm a 30-year-old female. Okay, so this happened last night through this morning. I had to relocate for work. I'm far away from home, which is fine by me. All of my work projects were put on hold due to weather, so I've been stuck at home. I've only been here a couple weeks, so I still don't know anybody. After watching Netflix all day yesterday, I decided to take an Uber out to a nearby bar to just have some social interaction going on around me. I met this guy through a dating app a few days ago, and we were talking about going out sometime at the end of the week. I figured it wouldn't hurt to invite him out. He agreed to meet me at the bar and did. We stayed there for maybe 3 hours. We weren't drunk or anything, but we ended up having a very nice evening. He is a medical technician, he had pets. At one point he and I had gone abroad to the same location. We just hit it off. He seemed like the ideal date. So I invited him over to have a glass of wine. We drove over in his car. We skipped the wine, went straight to the bedroom, and spent the next couple of hours there. After we finished, we were just laying there, and then things got weird. So we asked if he could spend the night. I personally like my space when I sleep, but I told him that would be fine. He suddenly got really clingy, like an 8th grader who just got his first girlfriend type clingy. He started just cuddling me, which I guess wasn't horrible, but it was more like he was making a cocoon around me with his body. He then just randomly put his face between my breasts and said, "I just love you so much." I laughed, but it was a very forced laugh. I was sufficiently uncomfortable. I lay there and pretended to text on my phone until he fell asleep. Once I was sure that he was asleep, I moved onto the couch and slept there. Come around 5 in the morning, he came into the living room and started pitching a fit that I didn't sleep in the same bed with him. I told him that I was just having trouble sleeping, but then he started to get on my nerves and I requested that he leave. He didn't take the hint. He went into my fridge and helped himself to a beer while singing some song. He then took my phone from me and demanded the password so he could call a few of his buddies over. I can't make this up. I got up and yelled at him to get out. He just dropped my phone on the floor and gave me the death stare. My pet raccoon, yes I have a raccoon, was getting scared. I got right up in his face and told him to leave or I would call the police. He flew into a fury, saying that if I called the cops, he was going to go to jail and more than likely be extradited to Colorado, not my current state. At this point, I was scared because I realized that I had no clue who this guy really was. He went into the bedroom and started fumbling through my bras and underwear. I got my phone to call the police. I still have no clear idea why he was doing this other than mental instability. Anyways, he came out holding a pair of my panties and then rushed towards me and knocked the phone out of my hand. I grabbed my hunting knife from under the coffee table and slashed it at him, but it didn't hit him. He started crying and running away, like his reaction wasn't compatible with that of someone who is sound of mind. I walked after him not to hurt him, but to make sure that he was leaving. He got in his car and drove off. I called the police and filed a report and explained his bizarre behavior. They ran the name that he gave me, but nothing turned up. Not him anyways, so this name he gave me was a fake. His personality and life on his dating profile was more than likely all fake. Just an all-round bad experience. The lingering smell. I live in Scotland, but I've moved around a lot in my adult life, trying to find somewhere affordable to live while I study and raise my children. I'm a single mother with 2 kids, so when I finally found my current home with 3 bedrooms at £450, which is $538 per month, I thought to myself, I'll never have to move again. I've had a lot of crummy landlords, so it was a relief to finally become a council tenant with the security that brings. I received the keys from the cheerful housing officer, and immediately started to put my stamp on the place. It was going to be mine for as long as I wanted, so I wanted it to be perfect. Carefully selected floral wallpaper went up, and I painted all the woodwork and had new carpets laid throughout. I worked on our new flat during the day, and by night I was on shift at the hospital. It was truly exhausting, but the thought of having somewhere secure to live spurred me on. Move-in day came on the 1st of October 2015. I've become the expert packer and unpacker due to moving nearly every year prior to that, so by late afternoon I had everything moved in and unpacked. I was really pleased with my handiwork, but was feeling fatigued. I decided to head outside and sit on the steps to get some air. I noticed an old man sitting outside. I'd seen him before, so I thought he must be one of my neighbors. I sat on the step near him and he introduced himself. Let's call him David. David said he'd been living there for 20 years and that it was a good place to raise kids. He told me most of my neighbors were now elderly, but has raised families there. He said it was good to see some young faces around and added that if I ever need anything, I should give his door a knock. It's worth saying that David is completely harmless, but he is a bit odd. For example, the clothes he was wearing on the day I met him in 2015, he is still wearing that set of clothes now, in 2022. I've never seen him wear anything other than his tracksuit pants, an old yellowing vest and tracksuit jacket. He also has long grey hair he always keeps under a beanie hat. I don't know why he doesn't change his clothes. He gets government assistance and his pension, so it seems strange. However, he's a pleasant man and wouldn't hurt a fly. True to his word, he did occasionally help with things like my car and would fix my kids' bikes. He did like to talk about his life and about when he was young, things like that. His tendency to ramble on could be a nuisance, especially as he always seemed to catch me when I was on my way out somewhere. He'd be sitting on the steps outside, so it was difficult to avoid him. If I had time, I'd sit and chat with him. I know that old age can be lonely, and my job entailed working with the elderly, so I was always willing to have a chat when I could. In the summer of 2016, I was still working the night shift, but was having problems sleeping during the day. The noise from children playing and screaming in the park outside our building was too much for me. I gave up trying and decided to go outside and sit on the step. I badly needed the vitamin D anyway, so I didn't mind losing sleep. As I went downstairs, I could see through the glass door, and David was sitting on the step. I opened the door and greeted him. As I sat down, I remarked on the odd smell in the communal area and told him that I could smell it inside my flat, but only in certain areas, like the utility closet that houses the electrical meter and switches. That's when David explained the smell was coming from the neighbor below me. According to David, she moved into her flat 2 weeks before me. It's a ground floor flat with access to a wheelchair ramp. These flats are on high demand, so they don't become available often. I asked David what could be causing the smell, and what he told me completely horrified me. The previous tenant had been a disabled man who was wheelchair bound. Let's call him Charlie. Apparently Charlie had a sketchy past and was known to make sexualized comments to not only his female carers but to the children of the other residents. David said Charlie was from Northern Ireland and had been shot in the kneecaps for some reason or another. He came to Scotland to be near relatives who could look after him. His constant drinking and lewd comments eventually alienated him from his family. The only people he saw were carers who visited to assist him to wash and dress. As Charlie aged, his body deteriorated further. He was no longer able to make it to the toilet on time, and a stroke had made it impossible for him to leave the house on his own. David said that Charlie was becoming verbally abusive, swearing at his carers and occasionally hitting them. Most care agencies have a 3-strike policy, then they cut the service. Charlie's service was cut in December of 2014. His social worker was informed by email, but she completely missed it as her inbox was overflowing with urgent cases, holiday greetings, and junk. Charlie was left to fend for himself. He had a left-sided weakness and was doubly incontinent, but he was stubborn and determined to get by on his own. None of the neighbors wanted to check on him. He'd made enemies of them all. Charlie was eventually found 6 months later. The overwhelming stench had caused complaints. When the police entered the flat, they found Charlie badly decomposed in his living room, surrounded by dirty continence pads and food containers. The continence pads had lined the floor. The urine and feces had soaked the bare floorboards and they had begun to rot. David told me that new floorboards had been put down, but the ground beneath was sand and dirt, which had also soaked up this waste. I sat in horror listening to David as he continued to tell me that Charlie's social worker had deleted the email without looking at it. No one knew anything until the awful smell permeated the building. Once Charlie's remains had been removed and the floorboards replaced, a new tenant moved in. The smell wasn't obvious at first, but the smell came back and there was no mistaking it. It smelled of death and decay. It was all over the building in random spots. David said that's why he's always outside on the front steps, to escape the smell. I cut in at this point as I was feeling spooked and desperately wanted to shake it off. I pointed out that the smell isn't always there, and he lives on the opposite side of the building, so shouldn't be affected. I suggested that it must be something else. He looked me dead in the eye and said that he believed Charlie was still here. After all, Charlie had all but liquefied and seeped into the dirt and sand beneath the floorboards. The thought of it all turned my stomach and creeped me out to the point I had to excuse myself, leaving David alone on the step. I should say here that since moving in, my son has refused to sleep in his own room. I decorated it beautifully and got a nightlight for him, but he wakes in the night screaming for me. I know most kids do this, but he insists someone is there and his room smells funny. I've been alone in the house when doors have slammed and closed on their own, and there have been sudden cold drafts that can't be explained. I don't think I'm superstitious, but this has made me believe that Charlie is indeed haunting the building. I have no other option but to stay. I just hope that no one else dies in the building. I am being stalked by my biology tutor. It started when I was 16, and I'm now 22 years old. When I was in college, from the ages of 16 to 20, I came into contact with a tutor at my college. His name is Jonathan, and he taught biology at my college. At first, he treated me rather normally, but as time went by, I started to notice things about him that would unsettle me. It started with when I'd be sitting in class working, and whenever I looked up, I'd see him staring across the room at me from his desk. If I looked at him, he wouldn't look away right away. I'd kept looking away and then back, and he'd be looking at something else. It used to make me feel very uncomfortable, and so bad I would purposely go for help with assignments to other tutors. Another thing he would do is mark my assignments and constantly leave the message, "Come find me," under anything I wrote that was wrong, rather than just writing what I needed to add on the assignment. This forced me into interacting with him, where he'd always turn the topic of conversation into something else. When I mentioned it to my only friend, she just said he was just being friendly, but I always felt intimidated by it. She began joking that I had the hots for him, so I stopped telling people what was happening. When I used to sit on the grass near to the campus lake, our college had a lake, I would use the time to play my Nintendo Switch. Once when I was playing, I turned around and saw him sitting on a picnic table alone looking at me. I felt unsettled by this and got up to leave. He shouted at me and said he needed to talk to me about my assignment. I went back to him and asked him how long he was sitting there, and he said he just went outside to think and didn't realize it was me. He went on talking about how our assignment is worth extra marks or something. It felt like the conversation was made up, and then he told me he noticed I didn't have much friends and asked me if I was okay. I said I was, and he went on to ask me if I had a girlfriend. I lied and said yes, and then said I needed the toilet and left. After that, it was very obvious to me he was attracted to me, but I found him very creepy and didn't know who to tell. I made a Reddit post and the people said I was probably making something out of nothing, and blamed my anxiety and told me to get therapy. I tried to dismiss everything I was thinking and didn't tell anyone that I felt I was being stalked. Whenever I was at college though, there would be occasions I'd look and see him watching me. It made college into a nightmare for 4 years straight, and I had nobody I felt I could talk to about him. There was a very uncomfortable situation for me once in one of his classes, where he taught a lesson about how livestock animals are artificially inseminated. Without me getting into graphic detail on this post, he talked about milking them for their seed with a gloved hand. It was nothing out of the ordinary for our class though, and we were given assignments as part of our course anyway. Jonathan said he had marked my assignments and to wait for it at the end of the lesson. When everyone else left the room, I went up to his desk to get it. When he handed me my assignment, I noticed he was wearing a single glove in one hand and started looking at me with an eerie smile. I got creeped out and left. I didn't ask about it, I just left the room. That was probably the most uncomfortable he had ever made me feel while I was studying, and I didn't even feel able to tell anyone about it because it was such a weird situation. I was worried nobody would believe me. I was worried everyone would laugh at me. When I graduated college, he sent my whole class friend requests on Facebook. I didn't accept, but he continued to delete and resend the request up until I blocked him. I then got a random text from an unknown number saying that we needed to talk, and that they had uncontrollable feelings for me. I knew who it was and blocked their number. He would later buy a house on the same street that I live on and bought a dog so he could walk it and run into me whenever I walked my dog. He made it look like an innocent coincidence, but I just knew he'd purposely done it to get close to me. To avoid him, I went for a late night walk at 2 a.m, thinking I would be safe because he'd be asleep. He approached me in the street, so I told him to leave me alone and called him a stalker. He then apologized for the way he'd been acting and begged for a second chance. I had never even given him a first chance. I went home and I became certain he might kill me. That is when I told my parents, who contacted the police. But they couldn't do anything about it because I had no evidence of any of these situations taking place. It was at least on the police record now though, and my parents started paying towards rent so I could live in a different area to feel safer. Once I was renting in a different city, he sold his old house and bought a new one there. I then moved and started renting somewhere else, and he was stuck with the house he bought. Even to this day, I feel like I have to keep looking over my shoulder. I'm not a very tall guy, about 5 foot, but he is over 6.5 feet tall. He is an intimidating man, and every time I see him it runs chills down my spine. I am too scared to even have an online dating account or social media anymore. I'm planning to move country soon so I can be rid of him once and for all. I won't say where I'm moving just in case he finds his post. I doubt he would, but better safe than sorry. Apparently I babysat more than one kid. When I was 13, I babysat a little girl named Emma, one of the sweetest kids you could think of. I was a regular babysitter for her, so much that when I couldn't babysit for a few months, she called all her other babysitters by my name. This happened after I came back to be a regular babysitter for her. It was about 10:30 at night. I had already put Emma to bed and had been channel surfing. The house was set up that the front half was open concept. The living room, dining room, and kitchen were side by side. In between the living room and dining room was an open doorway to the back half of the house. At one end was Emma's room, and the other end was her parents', and the bathroom connected to the parents' room. Now, while sitting on the couch, I heard something run down the hall to the bathroom. Assuming it was just Emma going to the bathroom, I let a few minutes go by and I heard the feet heading back down the hall. I turned to tell her to go back and make sure she flushed, as I hadn't heard it, but I only saw the tips of black hair that had ran past the open doorway. Here's the problem: Emma is blonde. I quickly jumped up and rushed to Emma's bedroom, throwing open the door. Her nightlight bright enough to make her out as she sat up and looked at me, rubbing her eyes in confusion. I asked her if she had went to the bathroom. When she shook her head, I did a once-over of her room, checking under her bed and a quick peek in her closet. I didn't see anything, and I just told Emma I was double-checking for monsters. I tucked Emma back in, saying goodnight, as I headed out of her room again, leaving it slightly open. I began to walk away, but stopped when I heard Emma speak, thinking she was going to ask me something. I turned to listen, only to hear, "You should have said something. Don't scare her. I really like her." I didn't say anything to the mom about this, and continued to babysit Emma until they moved away. I always made an effort after that to include the being. If Emma was drawing, an extra spot was set up. It seemed to make Emma happy, and nothing ever startled me again. Friend of 10 plus years admits he is a psychopath and murderer. This happened about 7 years ago, and I'm still mentally recovering. I was at a warehouse party that is used as an underground venue. I had a couple drinks and was chatting with a few people when I see a friend of mine, let's call him John. John and I had been friends since middle school. I'm in my 30s now, and our friendship only deepened after we graduated high school. We have had many one-on-one hangouts, dinner, drinks at a bar, etc., and nothing has ever been weird or awkward between us. We would discuss the typical topics: family, hobbies, politics, etc. John has always been a bit of a loner, but maintained a few close friendships, and I always chalked it up to him being a bit shy. Overall, I perceived him as a good person and one of the few male friends that I could trust. We engaged in conversation, and everything was going completely as usual. Then he randomly mentioned that he was jealous of me. This took me aback, and at the time, nothing was particularly great about my life. Low-wage job, no serious significant other, shitty car, etc. I began questioning him about why he would be jealous of me, and several times he tried to change the subject. I kept pressing him. He sounded depressed, and I thought he needed to open up. He goes on to say that he is jealous of the way I interact with people, how naturally it comes to me, how I always have a positive energy about me, and how I genuinely care about things. I tell him, well, there must be something you care about. He proceeds to tell me that he doesn't care about anything or anyone, and never has. That all of his friendships are based around similar hobbies, but he genuinely doesn't love or care about a single person that he has ever known. I was very disturbed at this point, as I could tell he was being completely sincere. I asked, what about Carlos? Carlos is a mutual friend, and the person I thought to be John's closest friend. He replied, even Carlos. I kept asking him different questions, like, not even your mom or sister? He said, no, I don't care about them. I don't hate them, but I don't love them. I never have. This conversation carries on for a good 30 minutes or so. He described his thought processes about a myriad of things in life since he was a child, basically devoid of feeling and knowing that he was different from others. John and I have taken psychedelics many times, not together, so I asked him, what do you experience when you trip? He replied, visual hallucinations, but mentally all my trips are the same. They are dark. I don't have euphoric love or other blissful feelings that some people describe. I have dark fantasies. He goes on to say that he has a proclivity for violence, that it is the only thing that he thinks about that makes him feel anything at all. Then he tells me that he has killed someone. He starts on to the details of the murder. He shot a man in the head, a stranger who was unsuspecting. He didn't go into much detail. He was apologizing to me profusely between every detail he did tell, saying that he deeply regrets telling me all of this about himself, that I'm a beautiful person and he can't believe I'm the one he confessed to. He mentions many times that I'm the only person he has ever told any of this to. He also tells me that he doesn't regret it. He then says that he must end himself now, that he has admitted this to me, and because all he wants to do is end people, particularly strangers. He said if he doesn't end himself, he will commit this act again. We discussed therapy and other options. This entire conversation lasted about 2.5 hours. At the end, he swears me to secrecy and tells me I've been a good friend, and gives me his last goodbyes. Now I'm sure you're wondering what happened. No, he didn't end up doing it. I ended up confiding in a few mutual friends, basically stating, stay away from John. I didn't go to the police as John told me I was the only person he had confided in, but one of my friends who I confided in did go to the police. I don't think anything came of it. John reached out to me several months later, telling me that he desperately wanted to commit this crime again. The desire was so strong, and he wishes he could just end it. I blocked him on everything after that. I ran into him at another party about a year later, and we exchanged greetings like nothing weird had ever happened between us. I dread running into him again. And those were the stories. I did unfortunately have to leave out some parts of the very last story. This is just to ensure that I follow all of YouTube's community guidelines and that this video doesn't get taken down. You can find the full story linked in the description down below. If you did enjoy the video, please don't forget to leave a like, or you can leave a comment, or you can subscribe to my channel. I would appreciate all three. I'm thinking of starting a series where I narrate fictional creepy stories, or alternatively, I was thinking of starting a series where I explore the mysteries of Reddit. These would all be true stories, whereas the other series would all be fictional. So let me know if you prefer more fictional, creepypasta kind of stories, or if you'd prefer a more fact-based research kind of series. Lastly, I just want to thank you all to the ends of the earth for 500 subscribers. This channel has been a dream of mine for so long, and I'm just so excited to have so many of you following my content. I'm also really excited to let you all know that I've started a community on Reddit for you to post your very own disturbing, creepy, paranormal, and weird stories. I would love to narrate your stories on my channel. I would also love to give a huge shout out to the Redditor that posted the story A Lingering Smell in the community for me to narrate. I honestly love interacting with you guys, and I cannot thank you enough for watching my videos. I love you guys so much, and I hope that you have the best week.